This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Welcome back to Seekers and True Crime Junkies. Nanette Bartow here again with Hit the Road Jack, Finding the Zodiac. I'm going to, I may or may not cough in this presentation. After 3 years, I finally caught COVID myself. So I am working at half limit here, but I really have a lot of information that I hope to get out. So if I have to turn my head to cough, I apologize for that ahead of time. I have actually started with an inspirational quote of the week. So we're going to turn to the presentation at this point in time. And that quote of the week is going to go to Seedy from a YouTube comment in which they stated, "I love all of the authors, Zodiac Unmasked, The True Identity of the Zodiac, Zodiac Solved, etc. If any of those titles were true, the FBI would have closed the case and signed off on their suspect. And that hasn't happened." I just responded to that. I couldn't have said it better. So the bottom line is every time you hear somebody in the news or another author making some claim that they have solved the Zodiac case, until the FBI has come out and absolutely stated that they have closed this case, then you are probably being lied to. So at any rate, moving on from that, we definitely have some research and laundry that I did come across over, well, this was supposed to happen last week. And of course, as we know, we had some huge technical difficulties, mostly in part in me trying to actually put together this additional information, long since forgotten in the Black Dahlia case. So I did go to look for, well, Terry Batcher had indicated that the watch theme had been something that had been all the way back since the Black Dahlia. And that's kind of what set me on this task of looking for additional information in regards to watches. And as I was doing that, I came across more information in regards to the Black Dahlia case, in which I had forgotten. But I thought it was worthy of bringing up because, again, it doesn't exclude Jack. If anything, it rather includes him once again. So I wanted to note that I found a daily police bulletin that indicated that Black Dahlia had a black address book on her. Of course, the different things that I'm finding throughout the internet is that it appears as it may have been a Mark Harmon's phone book, because from what I can tell, they're claiming that his name was embossed on the outside of it. However, the reports from the police kind of go back and forth, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today as I move quickly back into the Zodiac stuff. We do know that Black Dahlia had terrible teeth, as I've been told, over the years, and we can see that every image of her, since they have glorified her murder death, is that they have given her beautiful smile. So I put a couple pictures up there to show that, but it would be really interesting to see what she really looked like as far as her teeth were concerned. I always find it interesting when they attempt to make something glorified, because that usually means they're trying to make some money off of that. One of the things that I did see is that based on early suspicions, the murderer may have had skills in dissection. And of course, this is why they leaned towards the University of Southern California Medical School. And this is why George Hodel, or Steve Hodel, is attempted to claim his father was basically the Black Dahlia's killer, because he had a medical degree. Now, oh gosh. basically the butcher idea or the medical idea, you're going to see, kind of goes out of the way when we start to talk about the medical idea, but we'll discuss that as we get there. So right now we're just touching notes on the fact that the killer did know how to dissect a body, and that the black address book that was in Black Dahlia's belongings was recovered. The information that I'm finding on the internet indicates that the police contacted approximately 75 men from Short's address book. So now I'm a little confused. Why would the police think that that was her book, and everybody else is thinking that it is, let's see, Mark Hansen, that's his name, Mark Hansen's phone book. So I had two theories here. Either one, she stole Mark Hansen's book, and the men listed in that book were related to Mark Hansen, and this could probably have been one of the reasons why she was killed. That could have had some very important information in it, because the black address book that she was in possession of belonged to Mark Hansen, who was a powerful and rich nightclub and theater owner who employed Leslie Dillon, who was purportedly an errand boy with inside information on the Black Dahlia murder, such as a rose tattoo being cut from Beatty's leg and stuffed into her. I won't even say the word because I don't even know that it's true. However, if that was information that the cops felt was compelling because only the murderer would know that, or somebody with information would be closely related to the person who committed that murder, then it may very well be true information. One of the letters that I did find said, "Cunt BD, find me where I hid myself." Now, did she find him through that phone book? I'm not sure. So another excerpt I saw is that an address book belonging not to Elizabeth, but to an acquaintance of hers named Mark Hansen, some of its pages have been torn out. Now, this was information I had long since forgot about. And the pages that were torn out was either the JKL or the STU, because I just remember at the time when I read the information that Jack Tarrance would have fell into one of those categories. I want to say it was more on the JKL. I will continue to look for that information to see the actual pages that were torn out, but that will likely have led us to the killer, I would think. Otherwise, they wouldn't have wanted their information removed from that book. And the high, powerful, rich nightclub theater owner, that goes right on back. I mean, you think about, I think it was one of the females that went missing in the Black Dahlia era. She was related to the Carroll Theater, where, again, a rich nightclub owner and friends with Black Dahlia. So there is some rhyme and rhythm that's going on there that's kind of putting those back together. I'm now just naming that just another coincidence. So that page is missing, and maybe it was the JKL, and that could have had Jack's name on it. But if you use the acronym for just another coincidence, we get Jack again. So I'm going to start using Jack as one of those just another coincidence statements. And then I guess in a package that was mailed back with the words cut from the newspapers, it said, "Here is Dahlia's belongings and letter to follow." These items were soaked in gasoline to remove fingerprints. So again, the person was very well aware as early as this time frame that fingerprints were something that they could be led back to. So to soak the belongings in gasoline to remove them runs right into rhythm with Zodiac putting airplane cement onto his fingertips to cover his fingers. He knew that this was something that could get him caught. I did find some additional images. I was looking to see if I could determine whether or not there was a spot on her legs that were cut, maybe where that tattoo was, something that would really solidify the fact that she did have this tattoo removed and shoved wherever it was, but I could not. So one of the things I thought about is that if BD was last seen entering the lobby of the Biltmore, maybe she never left the Biltmore alive. The condition of the body indicates that she was bled out. Obviously, that could be done in a bathtub, just as Lipstick Killer did with Susan Degnan. And obviously, the crimes up to that point where the bathtub was implored to wash and clean the victims of any evidence, I suppose. But I thought, what if the murder takes place at the Biltmore and the reason for the bisection was to get her out of the establishment in suitcases? It sounds very mobbish, but completely doable. And how could somebody else explain the time frame in which she went missing and that the last place she was seen was there? Either way, I did find that they had another excerpt stating that this was consistent. Now, the bisection of Black Dahlia, don't get me wrong, is not consistent with the torso slayer. He did bisect his bodies in a much different way. I believed he operated either in the Ohio area or something to that degree, and they were looking at a Jack Anderson for that, and they believe that he actually came out to California at some point in time. So it crossed my mind that since the torso slayer actively worked his way through the railroad system and boxcars, killing homeless and hobos, decapitating them and removing all of their body parts, leaving, I guess, basically a torso, would be something that Jack could have fashioned himself off of, or he could have met this individual and have joined him in some of these murders. Of course, at a much later date, because the Ohio torso slayer actually operated, I want to say, in like 1938, so well before Jack got underway, but only a few short years before he started hopping around on trains himself. It did say as well that all of the victims in the torso slayer victims and in Black Dahlia had been cleaned after death. In fact, brush bristles were found embedded in her skin, so they scrubbed her clean. Also, a butcher knife was believed to have been used in both sets of cases. This is what takes me back to the lack of medical knowledge, because if you were somebody like Hodel, who was an operating surgeon, you would clearly have the correct tools in order to complete this bisection. You wouldn't have been so sloppy as to use a butcher knife, which was likely all you had on hand if you didn't have access to these other types of tools. So the butcher knife and the ability to bisect or dissect something throws it right back into the hunting lap of Jack Tarrance. I did find that there were additional letters I've not seen yet at this point, so I will be introducing those at some point after I complete a handwriting examination on them to see if they are consistent. We see that there are letters being written to the office of the district attorney. Now, this may just be the public attempting to help. I do not know, because I see the envelopes and not the letters themselves, but I will get back with everyone on that when that happens. Now, this is really why we actually got involved with Black Dahlia all over again, because I did not mean to step backwards in time, but Terry Batcher had indicated that he believed that the watch theory started way back with Black Dahlia, and he was able to provide me this article or this clipping of people holding a newspaper up that says "Set Murder Watch for Dahlia Killer." So we know that the Zodiac Killer, and in many of these cases, the suspect adopted whatever the media was using to refer to him. So if he, and we know not if he, when he saw this article that says "Set Murder Watch," and this is likely due to him saying he would turn himself in at a particular time on Wednesday in one of the communications. But we do know that watches now, via Dennis's research and investigations with law enforcement agencies, that watches that have been stopped at certain times have been left at different crime scenes, and they may very well be one watch from one scene being brought to another scene in order to cross connect. Either way, this is what I kind of figured. The watches stopped at a particular time were found at crime scenes per Dennis. Here's where the time reference begins with Jack, as far as I'm concerned. We saw that in the Sherry Jo Bates murder confession letter, he said it was time. She said, time for what? He said, time to kill. Zodiac at Lake Berryessa said, time is short. So we have a direct relation back there. Now it kind of explains actually why law enforcement focused on Arthur Lee Allen having a Zodiac diver's watch. Not that that makes any sense, but I get where their brain was going. And then, of course, we have Jack when he's asked if he's the Zodiac Killer. Let me see what time it is. So time has been a huge part of this that we are now seeing being dissipated on the internet. You're not really capable. Myself and Tarrance Batcher, both of us great researchers, have failed to come across these other entries in regards to these watches. And I know that I have seen them in the past. So that is that for Black Dahlia. Stepping back on into the Zodiac, I did find some more interesting information to kind of catch us up with some things I wasn't sure of about Jack in his early years. And this is when he met Letha. So basically, we talked about him working for the hog farm and killing about 50 hogs and then being gone before the owners got home. What I didn't know is what happened after that point. And per Dennis's book, he indicates that he went to Oklahoma from there. And that's exactly where I had originally shown where Letha was from. So that makes sense. So he met Letha in Oklahoma right after the hog farm killing in New Mexico. He stayed with her for a few months. Evidently, she was moving to California and she wanted Jack to come with her. And he said he wanted to keep on traveling. So Jack set out and headed east. I guess he ended up in Arkansas and met another woman. And that was the girl's dad who was making moonshine for a living, which was a crime back in those days. And it says that Jack was there a few days when he was hauling moonshine to Texas for this man. His second trip, Jack took the man's daughter with him. She was only 16 years old. Same age as Jack at that time. They crossed the Texas border with a load of moonshine in their trunk. They saw a roadblock that the police had set up, and Jack was somehow able to get around that and keep going. But about 10 miles down the road, they come to another one. Jack wasn't sure what to do before he had a chance. The police opened fire on their car and hit the girl in the forehead and killed her instantly. Jack evidently swerved off the road into some thick brush and was able to escape on foot. He then immediately called Letha and asked her if she wanted to get married. She said she did and asked Jack to meet her in San Francisco. So that kind of wraps up that how soon, when, where, and how of meeting Letha. Jack said he was going to go back to Texas where his mother was and his brothers and his sister. His uncle was still with them with the family at that time. Jack had a horse that he thought he could sell so he could make some money to get to San Francisco. But when he got there, it was already gone. So evidently his mother had already sold it. Now, in his book, he indicates that mom was moving to Aspermont, Texas, and that Jack took his younger brother Chuck and his younger sister Dee and took off hitchhiking, headed for San Francisco. He didn't take Dawn, which we'll meet Dawn later, his brother, but because he was too young to actually take on the road. And at some point in 46, obviously before March 15th, Jack met up again with Letha and they got married, and then Jack joined the Navy. So that kind of catches us up on that part of it. Also, there was information in regards to the which I didn't know. Now, I knew that Jack was stationed in Japan. I knew that's where the Mikado had played. What I didn't know was that it was a play that was being done on the military base, and Jack was actually a performer in it. So the Mikado is obviously referenced in several of the letters sent to the Bay Area newspapers, as Dennis indicates. And now we have a look back as to, where Jack had a love of that particular play. And clearly, if he participated in it, he would know it well enough to be able to use, as we saw done in the Zodiac cases. Now, this is also gives us the background as to how he met Iko in Japan while he was there. Evidently, he was at a brothel house that her mother owned. Some Marines came in, gave Jack some trouble. Jack handled them with a table leg. The mother and owner of the brothel felt that Jack was worthy of her daughter, gave Jack Iko, and Jack was married to her under Japanese law, it says. Now, Jack moved into her one-room house. Iko treated Jack like a king, and whenever Jack talked about her, it was with deep emotions, the book says. This may have been the only person in Jack's life that he ever really cared anything about, because it appears as though everyone else in his life thereafter was just basically a cover. Or at least that's what Dennis believes. So basically, Jack we talked about Letha writing to the president. Now, of course, in the book here, it shows that Dennis believed, and maybe this is the story from Jack. I don't know where he came up with President Johnson, but President Johnson was not the president at the time. Eisenhower clearly was the president in 1955. So if it isn't a misspeak, then that would just go back to the fact that we've discussed that Jack was friends with President Johnson. He hunted on his ranch when he was a teenager, and he was invited to his wedding. So she very well could have contacted President Johnson in lieu of not knowing who to contact directly in order to get a response and get Jack brought back home. Now, it says here that he wasn't, basically, Jack was ordered at some point in time to return to the military base, and Ika wasn't home. Jack had to leave without saying goodbye, and he was ultimately shipped home based on this letter that was written. And then we see actually the correspondence. Now, it is a George P. Miller, and he is a House of Representatives from Washington, D.C., and it is a letter that is written back to Letha in regards to Jack's return. It said, upon receipt of your letter of February 8th, concerning a hardship discharge for your husband, J.W. Tarrance, I immediately got in touch with the Navy. I was informed that your husband's application, along with substantiating evidence to support his request, which has to be finally approved here in Washington, has not been received. In all probability, these papers are en route. Just as soon as I learn from the Navy Department that your husband's papers have been received, I will, of course, urge favorable consideration in this case. I will write you again when I have anything definite to report. So that answers my question. Initially, I thought, could somebody simply just write the president and ask for their husband to come home after committing to a 3-year term in the military? Evidently, you could do just that. So we see that Jack is hauled back home, very upset about it. He has to leave the woman that he loves. Now this brings us to actually comparing the composites to Jack Tarrance and to Denny Tarrance. The bottom line, Jack W. Tarrance Jr. is the best composite match I have seen so far. And description match to the 2 eyewitness composites, and his son Denny is a composite match to the lookout suspects seen in the area of Lake Berryessa. Denny even has a scar on the same side of his head as the composite descripts. So I know that Dennis has been showing these particular composites for quite some time. There's no doubt in my mind that these are consistent with the way Jack looks. What I was more interested in is taking note to the actual lookout suspect from back in that time frame, because we know that the picture that we were seeing or that was being portrayed of Denny, while it does have a whole lot of similarity to this, is obviously a much older individual, not quite as young as what we're seeing in this composite. So I did pull out a picture. I was able to locate pictures of Denny while he was in Vietnam, which would have been circa the same time frame. And we can actually see that everything, including the Brillo-y type hair that's parted on one side, the way that it flows backwards or is brushed backwards is consistent. The tight lips, the missing lips. So we can see the composite that's being done by, that is of the Zodiac. I mean, we have full lips, just like in Jack. We've got full lips. And then, of course, we've got this little tight-lipped mouth that appears as though there are barely any lips. And, of course, it appears that way over here with this beard and mustache, but that sometimes can kind of skew our view of what those lips really look like. However, when I pulled out one without a beard, holy geez, complete straight line mouth, no lips whatsoever, is very consistent with that. So again, I went looking for something thinking I could rule something out, and turned out it only ruled it right back in. The people like Voight and the Zodiac Killer facts are always saying that others are twisting the evidence to support their victim. And I find that to be the classic transference, since that's exactly what they have been doing, while downplaying the significance of the evidence that supports Jack as the #1 suspect. The circumstantial and physical evidence supports Jack as well, and that's what we're going to start to climb into. So now we have two reports here. One is a white male, 35 to 45 years of age, approximately 5'8", heavy build, short brown hair, possibly with red tint, wears glasses, armed with a 9mm automatic. Available for comparison are slugs, casings, latents, and handwriting. So we have four things here that can be compared to any other crime scene if they all got on the ball and everybody crisscrossed their information. The second report was suspect white male, 25 to 30 years, 5'8" to 5'9", reddish brown hair, crew cut, heavy rimmed glasses, navy blue or black jacket. Now, there seems to be a running theme with the navy blue and black jacket, so we're going to stick with that as probably a very true fact. And here is what we have for Jack as far as the evidence that is consistent for him. We have a composite match. We have a physical description match. Zodiac 35 to 45. Jack is 41 at the time. Jack is 5'10". Zodiac was said to be 5'10". Shoe size 10.5. That equals Jack. Being barrel chested, absolutely Jack. Walked with a lumber, absolutely Jack. Spoke with a slow drawl, that is Jack. Reddish brown hair, Jack. Wore clear frame glasses and black heavy rimmed glasses. We're going to see that here in a few minutes. We've made a handwriting identification because it is absolutely a match. He used the same type of pen as the Zodiac, the Pilot Razor, which is a felt tip pen, if everybody remembers those Pilot pens. Created diagrams just like the Zodiac. He folded his paper in an unusual way. I believe in the three widthwise, making an envelope in the end. This is how they could determine whether or not somebody was a fake. He prefers a 5x7 piece of paper or an 8.5x11 folded in half, which is relative in size, and would write on it like it was a book. He had eaten bond paper like what the Zodiac had used. He claims to have written some of the letters using his left hand, which makes him ambidextrous. Although I'm the one that wrote in there that he used his left hand before discovering whether or not he was left or right-handed, and that still is kind of up in the air depending on whether or not that image was flipped in the camera. So at this point, I have him being left-handed, which would mean that he used his right hand in order to execute some of these letters as his non-dominant hand. He claimed the 340 wouldn't have a solve, and look at you guys. Today, there is no solve, and for anybody who says they have, they've not been able to make any sense out of the entire message. Vehicles. He had the vehicles, cryptography and ham radio experience. He was in the Air Force, the Navy, and the Armed Forces. He was a tech supply sergeant and member of RSMATs, which means he would know how to jump out of airplanes because they eventually became, they were a rescue team and eventually worked for or covered even NASA missions. He has proximity. He has hunting knowledge. He kills small family pets and animals. He kills small to large game and bisects his own kills. He even skins and tans hides. And I mean, he pretty much handles every aspect of putting that animal down. Since that's typically the way he ate when he was on the road or going from town to town back in the day, he could simply hunt or fish to eat. And himself and his son matches the composites. Attempted to kill his ex-wife Doris Reynolds at least 2 times that I can count, and Dennis believes that he killed his mother Nora. So this is giving us all kind of some relative stuff, but I did go on to find additional information. Linguistics. Now, I have 2 linguistics reports, and I wasn't aware at the time when I read them that I was referencing 2 different things. So this first one I'm going to reference now is actually a comparison of Jack's contract security reports from Hewlett Packard in 1983. Whereas the second set we're going to talk about much later when we talk about the letters that are written to Tom Voigt, because I asked for the linguistics to be compared to those letters from that Zodiac letter to Tom Voigt to the known Zodiac letters that occurred in the crimes. And of course, we had a consistent match there as well, and we'll talk about that later. But I just wanted to briefly read because linguistics and graphology also indicate that we are dealing with the same person. The email to me was hi Nanette. I read the Zodiac Jack stuff. I can see how a handwriting expert would have a field day with it. The apples to apples comparison between Zodiac and Jack would be Jack's reports when he was a rent-a-cop. One gets the same kind of register, and when one reads these rent-a-cop reports, one is reminded of the Zodiac's letters somewhat. What those letters reports have in common is kind of a broken formal register. It screams lower middle class hypercorrection with fussy phrases such as to, how, and as of yet. It may happen that, all Zodiac. I did find an instance of a rather unusual construction used by Zodiac and Jack talking about Sandra Jackson in a report as a rent-a-cop. Jack in CD3 says, I and other sergeants have had several discussions. The Zodiac used this unusual IN noun phrase construction, and I made note of it, but I forgot where it is. We will be hearing about that, so we know where it is. I just spent 30 minutes trying to find it again. Darn me for not noting where I saw it the first time around. It doesn't prove anything, of course, but is an example of the kind of fussy, hypercorrect usage that Jack as a rent-a-cop and Zodiac both displayed. We have a person writing in 1969-71 compared to a man writing in mid-1980s. The former is practically defining the cocky catch me if you can genre, and the latter is a writing in obliging cop talk. If this is an apple-to-apple comparison, we're talking about a red delicious with a wine sap or whatever. I'm guessing that means really, really good in linguistic language. The spellings and capitalizations could be studied in far greater detail. This is where our disciplines overlap. I would analyze the entire corpus of the Zodiac letters and Jack letters. This would be a huge undertaking and look for variation between uppercase and lowercase forms. Let me see. Jack wrote something that alone provided a bit of counter evidence. He wrote in Jack Tarrance Originals, page 6, she don't drive. This was the only thing he found as kind of a red flag, but he says he never seen that in the Zodiac. He has not seen all of the Zodiac stuff. So I'm going to keep my eye open for it as we move through the Zodiac communications. He says he never saw Zodiac use this vernacular third-person singular variant. Then again, I never read Jack write this way in his rent-a-cop reports either. So this little bit of variation spooked me. However, seeing that Jack was writing a personal letter, we have a different genre, a different register, as we say, and a variation of third-person singular is sensitive to this somewhat. So he's basically stating that if you're writing a personal note to somebody, that this might be the way one would articulate language, but that it was not consistent with much of what he, and I think I might have given him about 4 or 5 of the Zodiac letters, those that were long enough I thought that could prove important in him discovering the linguistic patterns. So basically we found that in the middle of this, that he spoke, that Jack and Zodiac used the I and structure, which to this linguistics professor who had actively done a survey on this, some research and statistics as well, found that less than 2% of the people indicated they would put I before the other people. And so that made this an extremely rare instance or use of language, and that both the Zodiac and Jack used it. Now, of course, I also had the those rent-a-cop, we'll call him rent-a-cop, but he was contract security. I think it was a little bit bigger than that. Not like what we refer to today as Walmart's rent-a-cop security, but I did have his reports looked at by a graphology class that I was attending every Tuesday evening. And we'd have anywhere from, I don't know, 10 to 18 individuals on there, all with decades of experience in graphology, really just looking over this handwriting from these rent-a-cop reports and reporting what they see in the structure of the handwriting that dictates behavior. And in that, we found that or at least these are the things that they stated: that he was smart, he was good character. I'm not sure what they meant by that, but I suppose to some people and I have heard individuals who knew of Jack that thought he was a good guy. He was organized. He was secretive and private. He was depressed. He was detail oriented. He had concentration, that there was some type of a military aspect because it appeared everything was in triplicate. I laughed because they did not know they were looking at my suspect for the Zodiac, who in fact was writing letters to the media in triplicate. So to hear that, I nearly fell out of my chair when they said it. Keeping his ego in check, of course, receiving pressure from bosses or persons above him. We did not really see a lot of bosses in Jack's life. I mean, from 1963, from General Electric to Hewlett Packard in 1983, there was a nice gap in between there. I'm not sure how many bosses he could have possibly had, since he didn't really seem to have any other jobs. He did own that battery shop, but in that case, he was the boss. So where he's receiving this pressure from, I was not exactly sure, but it would explain if he is doing what I think he's doing here in this effort to take down this list of people for someone else. That pressure could be huge. It says issues with his chain of command, has outbursts, has control. Oh, that is so Zodiac 101. He has jealousy. He's in charge. He's rebellious. He has a temper. He does not get close to others and takes his space. He's very protecting. He's uncomfortable. He's suspicious, leery, and watching, philosophical. He has the go to hell trait, which is the defiance. That's that capital K in the middle of lowercase printing. When you see individuals who place capital letters in the middle of lowercase printing, those are defying the rules of writing, obviously. So to use those capital letters means you do not follow the rules. You will have outbursts. You want to break out. You want everybody to see you. And that's what that letter K, capital letter K in the middle of speaking, and things of that nature tend to mean. And finally, one analyst spouted out that he would have been perfect for the CIA. Again, I busted up laughing at that point. I didn't need to fall out of my chair because I had already thought that there was a possibility that Jack had some insight with CIA. So that brings us over here to some more description matches. This little article over here is information given by Kathleen Johns. His chin had traces of pockmarks, such as can be caused by acne. He was wearing a dark blue nylon windbreaker style jacket over dark blue or black woolen bell-bottom pants. His shoes, in her words, were spit shined, the high gloss black reflecting the interior light of the car. He wore black, thick rimmed glasses held tightly on his head by a thin band of elastic, such as glasses wearing athletes and some working men use. He spoke in a monotone with no noticeable accent. So again, we're hearing that he had that, it was, as they described, a drawl, but not an accent, because it was monotone and drug out. And we heard that from the 911 operators that answered calls. And of course, Kathleen Johns now. So I pulled out some pictures, and we can see here that we've got Jack in these pleated brown pants and these spit shine black shiny shoes that he clearly loves to show off, because he has hiked his leg to take this picture in order to show them off. We do see him in black rim glasses. We see him in the clear rim glasses as described in the composites from San Francisco. And this literally every now and again, you can find Jack without wearing any of his glasses. So I'm not sure to what degree he could see without them, but in a majority of his pictures, you will find him wearing his glasses. This is Jack in 1975 at his home in North Highlands. And yes, brown pleated pants and shiny shoes will become a thing soon. There is those black rim glasses. I don't know how that got stuck behind there. Anyways, the car, another one of the articles indicated that indicated the car was a late model American made, a light colored two-door with black bucket seats, between which was a sporty console style automatic transmission gear shift. At the front end of the console was an ashtray, in which one on the right hand side was a built-in cigarette lighter. The car bearing the old California license plate was messy. Clothes and papers were scattered on the dashboard and on both the front and back seats, mostly men's clothing, but also some smaller pattern t-shirts, such as a child of 8 to 12 years might wear. Now, of course, we know that at this particular time he was with Doris. Doris had two small children. I want to say that at some point in time, we're going to hear about Danny Reynolds going to CYA because he got in trouble with Jack for something I'm not quite sure of. But he would have been around that teenage year, and that he had a younger sister. So having these child-sized clothing in his car would not have been out of order. Jack possessed the likeness of all the cars, as far as I'm concerned. We had a silver ice blue Chevy Impala, a white Chevy Renault, and a brown Ford Falcon. We're going to actually even hear about more vehicles that he had in possession that were consistent with other crime scenes. Dennis's book basically gave us a rundown of some of the things that he thought was consistent, though I found his own personal list was bigger and better than this one. It stated that the Zodiac was approximately 5'10" and 220 pounds with a paunch belly. That was Jack. He was seen in a silver or ice blue two-door Chevy Impala. That's Jack. Possibly had a brown Ford Falcon. Jack had a brown Ford Falcon. Was in the Navy. Jack, knew Morse code and ham radio operator. Jack, 40 to 45 years of age in 1969. Jack was 41. Proximity to Riverside in 1966, Lake Berryessa in 1969, and Lake Tahoe in 1970. This is all Jack. Was a hunter and taped a flashlight to a gun. This is Jack. Familiar with the Mikado. We talked about it. Used words that were not real words, like what's his name, all combined as a single word and written that way. Jack did this as well. Distinct type of writing, uses the plus instead of the word and. I saw plus, or I saw and think. Again, this is something that Jack did. Writing has unusual characteristics, the splitting of the words, which we did talk about early on. The symbol that's used on the steel flange beams, I've placed that symbol down here so you guys can see it from the Halloween card. Evidently, the FBI had indicated to Dennis that this was found on steel flange beams, and Jack worked for U.S. Steel in the early 1960s. So that's what his book says, but I was more interested in what his list said. So without repeating all of those things, we have, let's see, Zodiac got an idea from a movie called Dr. Zodiac that had been playing at Treasure Island in 1940s. Jack was stationed at Treasure Island in the 1940s. The Zodiac had blue eyes. Jack had blue eyes. First murder he called, well, at this point in time, Dennis was just really figuring out who Jack was, but he believed the first murder to be in 1966 in Riverside, and Jack was in Riverside in 1966. The murderer drove a Studebaker, a 1966 Studebaker at the Riverside murder, and Jack also drove a Studebaker in 1966. Zodiac was, well, we got that one. Lake Herman, Lake Berryessa murders. We know that Jack can be placed at these and in Lake Tahoe. Zodiac was into firearms. Jack always carried a gun. Taped a flashlight to the gun to shoot victims. Jack taped flashlight to gun to shoot raccoons. The Zodiac letter said something like fiddle fart around, and that was actually something that Jack would say. Composite letters referred to the Mikado. Yep. And then he ends that with, this is where it all begins. So it was interesting to find out that Jack actually had a Studebaker in 1966. And this is one of the vehicles that was seen at the crime scene of Sherry Jo Bates. So just another thing that puts that jab right back at it, Jack. So Dennis's story, I'm going to bullet point it, and we will talk more about it as we go. But in 2000, he notified the FBI after seeing John Walsh's America Most Wanted on Zodiac with Tom Voight and possibly my mentor, Bart Baggett. In 2001, Dennis gets Jack's stuff from his aunt's shed with Jack's consent. In 2001, Sonoma PD. I thought it was Sonoma PD, but it turns out I think that this is actually Santa Rosa PD, so I'm going to make that correction. Meets with Dennis and obtains Jack's palm print. In 2001, Tarrance Pascoe tells Dennis Jack is 85% matched to Zodiac, and Dennis steals the 1986 1986 Zodiac letter that has never been seen by the public, and actually releases it to the public. In 2002, SFPD botches Jack's envelope in the DNA exam after claiming that the FBI had not sent them anything for months and months and months, which actually I think turned out to be years. Kelly Carroll kept telling people telling Dennis that he'd not received anything from the FBI. Well, the FBI, and we're going to hear those audio tapes later, so I'll save it. 2002, 20 on 20, Harry Phillips does the DNA, but not Jack's. I now think I better understand his statement when he says we know the other 8 suspects were not the Zodiac, that if it was an open investigation in regards to Jack Tarrance, that they would not be the ones that to do that DNA and make that discovery, though I think it should have been probative, because if SFPD and others are going to make the claims they don't have the resources for that to occur, then albeit allow whoever has the resources to get it done to get it done. 2003, Sacramento has the Eaton bond. Sacramento is delivered the Eaton bond paper from Dennis that was in Jack's custody. Zodiac wrote on Eaton bond paper. 2002 to 2003, Zodiac writes to Tom Voight. I believe this is because Dennis is not getting the response that he needs, and he is clearly asking. He's asking to be figured out. He's submitting fingerprints. He's submitting DNA samples. He wants this to be done. He knows that this DNA thing is happening, and would now totally make sense as to why he would write this letter to Tom Voight, thinking that he would likely respond, since John Walsh did not respond back into the 90s, or at least to my knowledge respond. He might have, and that's just another thing that's being kept from us. 2003 to 2005, Tom Voight dumps his ongoing Zodiac website since 1998 or so and begins a whole new version not associated with AOL. Suspect to tear down all that it's kind of suspect to tear down all that history and then never put those originals, black and whites, otherwise the scans of the documents, back onto the new website. 2005, the original Zodiac letters are scanned in color for the first time that I can find. They are seen in a newsreel that is reporting on them, and then the altered versions go up on Tom Voight's message board and in his collection of letters before they go missing forever, so we're told. However, I'm now seeing that there are articles that are contradicting those statements. So the chances are, if they went missing, they didn't go missing. They were purposely taken so that that match could not be made after they discovered that Jack was a viable suspect. Let's see. An altered version shown by Tom Voight before they go missing forever. And Media LE defers all Zodiac-related questions or media questions to Tom Voight. Again, another thing that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. 2005 finale letter is written to Tim Miller asking why his identity is still a secret. And in 2008, Dennis finds the hood in the PA system and turns it over to the FBI. 2009, Dennis contacted me and I became a part of this legacy. Here we can actually see that the FBI took possession of 4 bones, which I was able to find in some of the information that Dennis had. He actually took a cadaver dog up to the property that Jack had purchased from his mother's father, and ran that cadaver dog and actually located human remains. Dennis had told me at the time that they'd done this and turned them over, that they thought it was too invasive to go and ask for marrow samples, which is what they would basically need, I guess, to compare the DNA to these bones to determine which family member or who they might belong to in this Zodiac saga. But he turned over the bones, 6 envelopes that Jack had written, obviously for DNA purposes. So while I thought there was 1 envelope left, it looks like 6 envelopes were turned over. So maybe we do have more samples that can be ran for DNA off of those at a later time. And then, of course, this is the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department property receipt and report, where they received the Eaton bond paper. 2001 or 2002, the 85% handwriting match from Terrance Pascal kind of blows me away, because as document examiners, we don't use percentages. It really is or it isn't. Obviously, knowing that we were dealing with partially disguised handwriting, that you would want to set that disguise aside and work with the stuff that you felt was more fluid and more naturally written with fluidity and speed, so you could still make that identification or exclusion based on that information. It looks like the information on this sheet, while it's a little hard to read, says Sheriff's Department 8/5 of 2003, Eaton Bond, 2 sheets, taken into custody by R. Turner, badge number 589. The 2008 hood found in the PA and turned over to the FBI. The FBI indicated, well, let's just get to the hood, because I think we're going to come up on it. Here we go. So in Stephen Dewhurst's book, we have this. And we're down to 1 minute. All right, you guys. Well, I think I'm going to go ahead and end that early before climbing into the hood, but we do have a lot of great information that's coming up. I'll just give you a sneak preview of this thing. And we will talk about some of the similarities, the consistencies, and maybe even some of the differences that are being claimed in regards to the hood when we come back next week. So for now, everybody, enjoy. Have a great weekend, and we will see you next Friday. Take care.